You ever stop and think, is there a speed limit for life itself? Well, today we're diving into that exact question by looking at the engine that powers, well, pretty much every ecosystem on Earth: photosynthesis.
I mean, on the surface, it sounds like a simple question, right? How fast can a plant really grow? Is there some kind of universal speed limit? And if there is, what's controlling the gas pedal? Let's find out.
To figure out that speed limit, we've got to pop the hood and look at the engine. And for a plant, that engine is the absolutely incredible process of photosynthesis.
At its core, photosynthesis is just this beautiful piece of chemical engineering. It's how plants and algae whip up their own food, a sugar called glucose. They are literally turning sunlight into life. And as a little bonus, they produce the oxygen that you and I need to breathe. It is, no exaggeration, the foundation for almost all life on this planet.
So this equation right here, it pretty much sums up the whole amazing process. On the left, you've got your ingredients: carbon dioxide and water. Then, with a little boost from light energy, the plant works its magic, turning them into glucose for its own growth, and, of course, the oxygen we breathe. It's a reaction that needs to take in energy, in this case light, to get the job done.
Okay, so if that's the engine, how in the world do we measure its speed? How do you actually clock photosynthesis? Well, it turns out the answer is surprisingly simple. You count bubbles.
Scientists use this really elegant experiment to measure it. Using an aquatic plant, something like pondweed, is perfect because you can actually see it working. It releases these tiny, visible bubbles of oxygen as it photosynthesizes. So you just put it in water, shine a light on it, and you can literally count the bubbles per minute to get a direct read on the rate. It's so clever, and you get to see the whole process in action.
Now, you know, for any good investigation, you gotta be crystal clear about your variables. The one thing we're changing on purpose, that's our independent variable, is the distance of the lamp. The thing we're measuring, the dependent variable, is the rate of those bubbles. And everything else, like the temperature, the CO2 level, all of that has to stay exactly the same. Those are our controls. All right, the experiment is set. The bubbles have been counted. Now it's time to look at the data. And folks, this is where our mystery really kicks off. So here are our first clues. When the lamp is super close, just 10 centimeters away, we're getting a massive 120 bubbles per minute. As we move it further away, the rate drops off. Okay, that makes sense. Less light, less photosynthesis. But look really closely at how it's dropping off. It's not some steady, predictable decline. If you were to throw these results onto a graph, with distance on one axis and bubbles on the other, you wouldn't get that nice, clean, straight line you might expect. Nope, you get a curve. The relationship is clearly not as simple as it looks. And that brings us to the central puzzle of this whole thing. We know more light should mean a faster rate. So, why isn't it a simple, direct relationship? Why does our data give us this curve? There's obviously something else going on here, some kind of hidden rule that we need to figure out. To solve this puzzle, we have to look beyond just the distance. We need to think about what's actually happening to the light itself. It's time to crack the code. Just picture this. You've got a flashlight in a totally dark room. The further that beam of light travels, the more it spreads out and gets dimmer, right? The exact same thing is happening here. As the distance from our lamp increases, that light energy gets spread over a much wider area. And that means the intensity of the light, the actual amount of energy hitting our plant, gets weaker. It's what we call an inverse relationship. Now, this relationship is described by a fundamental law of physics, the inverse square law. I know, it sounds super complicated, but the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. If you double your distance from a light source, the light doesn't just get half as bright. It actually spreads out over 4 times the area, which makes the intensity only 1/4 as strong. So the big takeaway here is this. Light intensity isn't just proportional to distance, it's proportional to 1 divided by the distance squared. This little piece of math is the secret key we need to unlock our data. So now we have the key. Let's go back to our results, apply this new rule, and get ready, because this is the aha moment. Okay, let's look at our data again. But see that new column we've added? That's our 1/distance squared value. Based on that inverse square law, this new number is what really represents the light intensity that's hitting the plant at each step. And boom! There is the big reveal. When we take our bubble count and plot it not against distance, but against our new light intensity value,
That puzzling curve magically transforms into a perfect straight line. The mystery is solved. This finally reveals the true relationship. Our initial hunch, that more light means more photosynthesis, was totally right. We were just measuring the wrong thing. Once we plot against light intensity instead of just distance, the pattern is crystal clear. The rate of photosynthesis is directly proportional to light intensity. So we've cracked the code for light. But light isn't the only thing controlling a plant's speed limit. What other factors can hit the brakes on photosynthesis?
The concept we need to understand here is called a limiting factor. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a bottleneck in a factory. It doesn't matter how fast the rest of your assembly line is, right? Your total output is always going to be limited by the slowest part of the process. For a plant, if any one of its key ingredients is in short supply, that becomes the limiting factor.
So besides the light intensity we've already been digging into, there are two other main dials controlling a plant's speed: the amount of carbon dioxide in the air and the temperature, which is super important for the enzymes that make these reactions happen. And this is where it gets really interesting, because these factors all play off each other. Look at scenario A. If you've got low CO2, it doesn't matter how much light you blast at the plant, its speed hits a ceiling. The CO2 is the bottleneck. But now look at scenario B. With plenty of CO2, light becomes the limiting factor again, and adding more has a huge effect. It's this constant, delicate balancing act. And all of this brings us to one final, massive question. We've cracked the code of a plant's speed limit. We understand the roles of light, CO2, and temperature. So just imagine if we could perfectly control all of these things, say in a giant greenhouse or a vertical farm. What could unlocking a plant's true maximum speed really mean for the future of agriculture and for our ability to feed a growing world?